These mics are clearly not meant for people who don't have pockets. Fantastic to be here. I'm from a group called Pratham, and so I'm going to talk only about primary education. India has, the room is too dark, so I can't ask you questions, about 250 million children in the school-going age. So if I give you some facts, and then we give you some opportunities, and do it all in a 10-minute time frame, here's what I would say. 250 million children, enrollment rates today in India are above 98%. And I think that's a task that should not be underestimated. Probably the only other fact that is much more impressive is the vaccination one. 98.6% children are in school today. Number two, attendance. And I think the best definition of attendance that I have gotten is from a kid in a rural UP school in about 3rd or 4th standard. In most schools, especially government schools, on the blackboard every day, you write 2 numbers. One is enrollment and one is attendance. So I was in this class, and actually I didn't care about either of those numbers, but I wanted to see if the children could read that word. And so I said, "Ye kya hai?" And somebody in the class said, "Namankan." It's a difficult word for enrollment. So I asked, what does it mean? And so somebody in the group said, it means ki hum school, mera naam school mein aa gaya hai. Next word is upasthiti, another difficult word for a 3rd or 4th standard kid to read. What is the meaning? The meaning, according to the children, was hum bhi aa gaye hain. If you look at the attendance map of India, so we have very high enrollment across the board. It became even higher after schools opened after COVID, because I think there was a lot of desire to get back to normal and get back to school. And so we went from 97 something to 98 something after schools opened. But if I look at an attendance map of India, it's very colorful. Some states which are green, which is good, but there are states like my own state, I'm from Bihar or UP or Madhya Pradesh, where on any given day, about 50, 55, 56% kids come to school. And this number has not changed in the last at least 10 years or since whenever we have data. So everybody's name is in school, and everybody is in school every now and then, at least in some states. Third fact is, if we look at learning, what are children learning in school? My organization has been putting out this annual status of education report now for almost 17, 18 years. And there we find some very, very chronic problems. One is that if I look at, can children read? And I actually brought you something so you can see it. This, if you can see to the back, is a very simple story at kind of a 2nd standard level. If I look at 3rd standard children over the last 10 years, from 2012 till 2022, we find, and this is a very large sample, it's 3 times the sample of NSS, so almost 7 lakh children in the sample, we find that by 3rd standard, less than 30% children are actually reading at this level. Now the implications of that are many, because as you know, our schools are organized by grade, which is by age, which means for every grade, you have a certain curriculum and a certain textbook. And when you go to the next class, I don't know if it's like that I am, whether if you're in 2nd year, anybody helps you revise what you did in 1st year. It's a very linear, progressive system, and if you're not on the pace that is expected, then nobody comes back to lift you up. So if you have less than 30% children at grade level in class 3, that number went down slightly during COVID, it went down to 25, it means that by the time a child in India is 8 years old, we have already decided that 75% is not going to make it. Every single person in this room was reading this by the time you were in 3rd standard. 5th standard, we have only half the children who are at this level. 5 years of schooling, lots of expenditure by government, lots of investment by parents, high aspirations, but that's the level at which we are. So high enrollment, varied attendance, chronically low levels of learning. Along comes COVID, and actually this has nothing to do with COVID, but end of July, roughly around this time in 2020, India's new education policy was launched. And in some ways, I think it was a good thing that it was launched at a time when we were all at home. because you could actually read it and digest it and think what to do. When the world is running, you're on a treadmill, and it's difficult to stop and take stock. And what the new education policy says, it says many things. As far as I'm concerned, from my Prathamik or primary point of view, I'll only talk about the opportunities or the highlights of the policy. It says 2 or 3 very important things. One is that it looks at the age group from 3 to 8 as a continuum. Until now, officially, education system started at age 6. We talked about 6 to 14. 6 is when you're supposed to be in first standard and onwards. For the first time, the policy actually recognizes that a lot happens before you're 6 years old, and we need to look at that space, and we need to look at what happens before you enter standard 1, all the way till end of standard 2 or beginning of standard 3 in one continuum. It recognizes that for doing this, the foundation needs to be broad and not narrow. Just knowing numbers and not knowing alphabets and being able to say twinkle, twinkle is not enough. You need a breadth of skills, problem solving, critical thinking, even for that age, to really build the foundation of where we want to go. And as we build these foundations, there'll be a progression. Now, the policy document used to be, the first draft was about 500 pages. So, of course, nobody read it, excepting a few people who really were curious to get in there and see. But the policy that was launched is about 56 pages. In case anybody here feels like reading the policy document, go to page 8. Because according to me, the most important thing in that policy is on page 8. Page 8, there is a section, and I think it should be a box with a bold font, which says that if in the next 5 years, and let's say we have a little bit of a sliding scale, because from 20 to 2025 was not really a period in which we worked, but even if you say from today, in the next 5 years, if all of India's children by standard 3 don't learn this basic reading and basic arithmetic, then the rest of the policy is irrelevant. So in many ways, I think the policy sets out a challenge, and it's a challenge in which everybody has to participate. If you look at the trend lines going even the last 10 years, from 12 to 2022, you find that we have made very, very incremental progress, maybe a couple of percentage points improvement, going from like a 26 to a 27 or 28%. Along came COVID, and you went down to about like a 25%. So nothing that we do today is going to take us in the next 5 years from where we are to where we need to be, which is to be as close to 100% as possible, so that every child in India has the capability to end up here if they want to. And to do that, I think, not only do classrooms have to change, classroom practices have to change, but I think everything in the world around our children have to change. So one of the reasons when I was invited to come here, because you are as far away as possible from where I am, we are at the very bottom looking at what to do with the 3 to 8-year-olds in all kinds of places across India. And you are the very apex of education and higher education in the country. And I think that this is a great opportunity for the country to think, what shall I do? So hands. What shall I think, which is in your head? The policy says very clearly, if you don't achieve this in the next 5 years, everything that you're learning here and going to do is really going to be irrelevant. And the third thing is, which I think is the most important thing, is what is in our hearts? Do we really as a society want to give up on 75% of our children even before they're 10 years old? So I leave it to you, IIM, Ahmedabad, students and faculty, to think about this, because this change has to come from everywhere. It has to come from people who are not connected to education. It has to come because we all have children, either in our homes or around us, who are exactly in this age, who need to have a life trajectory which is completely different. And unlike vaccines, which require enormous amounts of technical and scientific inputs, this is something that I think India can do in the next 5 years, if we consider ourselves as Indian citizens responsible for making the change. Thank you.